Thanks, Cheryl. So what I've done is divided the actions under three main objectives, and they are very high level, and there's quite a number of proposed actions, and some of this we have had input from initial members of this working group, and then I've built on it from there. And I'm keen to hear if there's things that need to be added or taken away, as Cheryl suggested. And so really, the first one is building a culture of accessibility. I've used that heading because in many cases it's a matter of understanding what accessibility is and how it actually can permeate through an organisation. So it's not saying that, oh, it's good to work on accessibility and we'll do it here to one side. It's something that can go throughout the organisation and be considered as ICANN does different types of work. And so to do that, it's important to develop awareness of disability, different types of disability, and we heard that as we went around the table, that it's not just thinking about the typical physical disability, vision impairment, hearing impairment, but learning disability, and there's a lot of others to consider as well. So developing a disability awareness toolkit would be a number one, and from that developing and providing disability training, disability awareness training, both to ICANN staff and members of various SOs, ACs, and I'm starting to use all the acronyms now. And also having keynote speakers at ICANN meetings that include representatives from the disability community, because the disability movement, their main motto is nothing about us without us. So it's one thing us talking about disability, but some of us here have disabilities, and we want to ensure that as we develop with this, that there are more people who experience disability as part of their lives, and talking from that experience is very important, and building that into ICANN meetings on a open forum level would be very useful. And again, this thing of promoting disability through disability showcase events. So we have AP Ralo Showcase talking about what the region is doing, and that's going, we're all looking forward to that. That's Wednesday at 6 p.m, isn't it? Yes, a little promotion there. But in future, maybe we can look at disability showcase events, demonstrating various innovative ways people with disability use the internet. And there would be a lot of things you would never believe how the internet is being used. And I can, yes.
Do it.
Yes.
Bring it on.
At the Australian IGF last year, I organised a panel, and part of that panel was a deaf-blind woman, and she participated strongly on the panel. She was part of a panel, and she had a deaf-blind interpreter. We have a sign language interpreter here for a person who is deaf and hearing impaired, but this particular deaf-blind interpreter is very different because it's totally tactile. And they have a little table, they support their arms, and as Cheryl is demonstrating with Maureen, that is what is happening. And the particular woman who is deaf-blind, vivacious, full of energy, excitement. She was, I think, traveling to the Philippines for an international deaf-blind convention. So, you know, there is so much that's possible. It's just that the environment provides the barriers to that full-on participation. And that is what we can work to improve upon. Okay, so the next point is about accessibility champions amongst ICANN staff. There might be people around this room who work for ICANN who say, wow, this is something that really grabs me. And on all different levels, on the senior executive level, I've had short chats with Fadi, both at the APR IGF in Seoul and also at the IGF in Bali, and talked to him about disability and the importance of accessibility. And he listened. He is great at listening. I saw him in passing yesterday, sitting down, talking to some people. He saw me, he leapt up and came up and said, how are things going? And I was so pleased to be able to tell him that this accessibility task force is meeting. You know, we may have an accessibility champion right at the most senior level, but to have those people permeating through staff so that when there are discussions about various issues, they can say, oh, hey, what about accessibility here? And then, of course, if there are staff with disability employed at ICANN, then it's again the lived experience. Part of the process is there. And again, this thing about the last bullet point is incorporating an accessibility trigger in policy development as well as ICANN processes and practice. That means, again, being aware of accessibility when it may have an impact on particular policies that are developed, say, in the CCNSO, GNSO, when it comes to how new GTLDs are delivered. Is there some way, and I'll come to those bullet points in the next one, that best practice guides on web accessibility can be developed. And so just to have that as a type of a triggering document would be very useful. Then coming to the next main heading, increasing web accessibility. Now, a key point that Peter mentioned was about the need for ICANN to be a good model and to show that, yes, the ICANN websites meet the internationally recognized W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. WCAG version 2, level AA. Level AA is the common level that governments in many parts of the world accept as the way that government websites should meet the accessibility guidelines. And I believe that the web development team is aware of this, and I look forward to hearing some positive feedback about that. And then developing an ICANN policy on web accessibility generally, so that can then be taken out to outreach to the internet community. Encouraging CCTLDs to develop a best practice guide on web accessibility. So in various countries, there can be awareness at that top level about web accessibility that can filter down. In Australia, Registry last year did a blog on International Day of Persons with Disability, and they asked me to put in 10 top tips on web accessibility. They had that published on their blog. It was picked up by a lot of online domain name publications. So the word spread easily, and that can happen more and more as more CCTLDs take that on. And encouraging registries to use this best practice guide in relation to registrars. So that can be a way of alerting registrants to use the WCAG version 2 when developing websites. So ICANN have an amazing, exciting possibility to influence web accessibility on a very broad scale across the world. It's a fantastic opportunity. And the final set of objectives relate to ensuring minimal barriers to participation and engagement with ICANN processes and practices. So, I mean, we see some good things. We have a lanyard, and it's easy to put on. There's no fiddling with pins. A person with arthritis or limited mobility finds that difficult. We're in a venue that a wheelchair user would find easy to get around in most cases. And we don't think about that either. But that's built-in accessibility. That's universal design, and that's what we want to reach. And so having processes in place within ICANN so that, for example, looking at accessibility meeting guidelines that are available and seeing how does that fit in with the ICANN world, and maybe adapting or adopting some of those. And also the ICANN meetings to be, where possible and practical, use Cheryl's words there, be accessible for people with disability, including real-time captioning. We weren't able to get that here, but you saw, for those of you who went to the welcome ceremony this morning, there is a large screen where all the real-time captioning happens, and that is, of course, valuable for people who don't have English as their first language, but it's vital for people who are deaf or have a severe hearing impairment, so it meets a lot of different needs. Thank you. And other facilities on request, and one example here is sign language interpretation, and we're delighted that we have the opportunity of being able to have Alvin here from the Disabled Persons Association. He wouldn't be able to participate in the meeting if it wasn't for ICANN obtaining the sign language interpreter, so that's really good. And the other one, of course, is if there are blind people get material in different ways. It can be online, but if a blind person is a Braille user, it can be really useful to have a Braille document to go through the material quickly and easily. Communication tools such as web conferencing, we hope to have as accessible as possible. It's a real bugbear with web conferencing. Andrea Sachs at the IGF in Bali presented about this particular difficulty, and it's something that we hope can be improved upon in future. And finally, something fairly basic but very important is that ICANN information material is produced with good color contrast, with sans serif fonts, and in a good adequate size. And there's a lot of people amongst us, unfortunately. We all age sooner or later. And
better than the alternative.
and we need to be able to read it in an easy way. So I put that together based on my experience, the input from a number of people, and I've said down the bottom, is this a suitable starting point? Is this too much to start with? It's a long list. Is there other things that should be included? Apart from this, should some be excluded? Are there any other approaches we should take? And then how can we move forwards on a suitable, let's call it a disability action plan, which has realistic timelines, because we have to be realistic, there's a lot there, and the assigned responsibilities. Thank you.